welcome again to another episode of the New Earth podcast. This is the new season, and I've decided to call it In God's Truth. So, I want to give you some introduction on what this season is going to be, and I want to talk also about the previous season and what we've achieved so far, and all the incredible things we have achieved. Thanks also, especially to all the incredible guests we had, and I had a lot of you coming to me and tell me how useful this podcast is being for you and for your own growth, for your own health. And I want to thank you as well for listening, for sharing, and for really appreciating our work and my work. And the previous season has really been about awakening in a lot of different ways, and also all the ways that lead to a healthy lifestyle so that we can reach the awakening and maintain it. And awakening has a lot of meanings, and we talked about the psychological awakening, the spiritual awakening, the ego death. But all the things that we have said in the previous season were really like a sort of introduction and ways to make people understand how different it is and how many different topics there are to talk about. They're very different also from the usual, what we're used to, from the life that we're told to have by society, from the kind of indoctrinations we receive. And you see, the previous season, in fact, had music healing and shamanic healing and holistic healing of various kinds and different kinds of stories and herbalism and Ayurveda. So many things that ultimately were so on their own, complete and incredible ways of healing and reaching well-being, and not only well-being, but also a higher state of spiritual awakening and of intelligence as well. Because once we awaken and we reach the ego death and we actually reactivate our cortical brain, which is the part in which we are conscious and clear-minded, and we are connected with the whole, and we are connected to consciousness, to the consciousness of the universe and of God. It's really that is the part of us that we need to reactivate. But once we are there, we are not in our ego. And so it's important to make a distinction between these two things. And you can see how all the things we talked about, which are almost all have to do with also like music, for example. Most of the topics we talked about really had to do with stimulating our perceptions, from music to touch to through our food, also give to the plant that we are all the nutrients that it needs to have in order for it to properly work and to properly give us a higher state of mind, a higher consciousness, the activation of the higher areas of our brain. All of those things together really have to do a lot also with stimulation and perception of colors of the food we eat, and of all the smells and all the things that have to do with perception. Because the cortical brain really has a lot to do with perception, with sound, with vision, and with also connecting with others. And a lot of things that have to do with, from shamanic medicine to herbalism, have also a lot to do with connecting with the spirit of plants, of other beings and of others, thanks to communities and communal kind of events and rituals and spiritual, not only spirituality, but also religious rituals, but also just holistic holistic health kind of rituals, holistic wellness. And so I feel like with the previous season, we really have achieved a lot in this sense, and we have provided to you guys all the tools, or a lot of the tools that you need to really understand that once you start this journey towards awakening, your lifestyle has to change, and it will change, because it's just the plant that you are is going to start having different needs than the plant that you thought you were when you were in your ego. But also recognizing our ego is very complicated sometimes, because not sometimes, all the times really, because the ego is so ingrained in us that we forgot. We are so much into our innermost part of the brain, the lesser evolved one, that we really have completely forgotten about consciousness and about what we are, which is we are a part of the universe, and we are the whole universe in the end. It is just experiencing itself through our bodies, through a small, tiny part of it, but we're just the consciousness of the universe itself. But we are that consciousness only if we really tap into that consciousness. Otherwise, we're just pieces of the universe that have forgotten of being pieces. So why God's truth? What is the meaning of it? And what's the connection between the previous seasons and the current season? And I think for me it's obvious, but I want to explain it to you guys. Obviously, in the previous season, we have also talked about spirituality, of all kinds of spirituality, really, because we talked about Eastern philosophies and religions as much as Western philosophies and religions. And we have talked about Jesus and Christianity and Catholicism in our own way, although, however, the church itself as an institution is often now regarded as something negative, that for thousands of years have also committed a lot of atrocities against the world, as much as it has also helped people in a lot of ways. But like ultimately, our institutions are ultimately a form of ego, because that's what a piece of the whole must be. A piece of the whole, if we whenever a piece of the whole identifies with something separate, whether it is a church or whether it is a government or whether it is a person, that's that kind of identification, that's the ego. So nothing done through the ego can actually be too high in terms of spirituality. And so also I think most of us perceive a lot of institutions that ultimately have good goals as negative, because there are some pieces of them that are negative. There are a lot of scandals associated also with religious institutions, but sometimes it's just one person, two people, maybe there are a lot, but still it's not the whole goal of the institution itself necessarily. But we tend to associate all the negative things to the whole philosophy behind an institution, which is a big mistake. And we do the same in a lot of different ways. We tend to be indoctrinated to take a piece of the whole and take the wrongdoings of one piece and associate it with the whole thing, and then everything crumbles. And it's not always the case. So, but we have talked about a lot of different religions and a lot of different belief systems. I feel like one that we haven't really touched on is probably like Muslim and Islamic religion. And so that is really something that probably we're going to be talking about probably in this new season. Hopefully we're going to have someone like some guests that are going to be talking about that as well, because ultimately all religions have something in common, which is this idea that we are part of something bigger, and that something bigger is God. So when we talk about God's truth, what is God's truth? Is there really one truth or not? Well, I believe that it's obvious that there is only one truth. And the reason why is because how can multiple truths exist in the same universe? You know, the universe is consistent with itself. And so as much as the laws of the universe are the same everywhere, and even if sometimes, and in current physics, there is this split between the Newtonian physics and relativity, and people believe that there is no way of putting them together, I think that is actually wrong, because what we don't realize is that all the forces at the microscopic and at the quantum level are ultimately the same forces that we find at the higher levels, and it's the same kind of laws. It's just that through different scales, some energy of the Big Bang gets lost. Some of the trauma that we are dispersing as a universe gets lost. Some of the love that we are and that keeps us together in some way is either lost or destroyed or is getting together. And so what is really holding our universe together is love, and what is keeping a universe apart is the destructive force of the Big Bang, of separation, that at the mind level takes the shape of the ego. And so the ego is ultimately the force that keeps us apart, as much as forces that keep particles apart. And gravity is the force that keeps us together, as much as love keeps us together at the relational level. So all of these forces in the universe are ultimately the same, just they have different names, they have different strength, they have different ways of expressing themselves, and they become weaker or stronger based on the scale that we look at, but it's ultimately all the same thing. And so our universe is just one thing that is consistent with itself. And so in a being, and we are part of it, we are a piece of it, we are in it. And so when you are part of a system, when you are in a system, there is no way for you to have multiple truths, because what is truth? Truth is how things work, what kind of effect you obtain when you have a cause, the law of cause and reaction in our universe. And the kind of effect you get is in some way always the same, to the same stimulus, even if we don't realize that, because at different scales, different things different things happen. They make us believe that they are truly different, but they're just a different expression and a different way of showing the same effect. And so I want to talk about God's truth in a sense, from a perspective not only of physical forces and psychology and spirituality, but also at the sociological and institutional level and on a global scale. I think we are today at a time really of point of no return. And I think a lot of you guys have already realized that we are really at a point in which so many bad things are happening in the world. And wherever we turn, wherever we look, there's something wrong, and there is corruption, and there's so many negative things. And it's quite obvious that there is no way back. We need to change our world. And there are a lot of people every day, and I am one of them, and I'm sure you guys are doing your contribution, are giving your contribution as well, to make the world better, to change it, to give it love, to heal the world one person at a time. And sometimes, you see, is the same kind of rule. Sometimes healing takes different shapes for different people, but ultimately it's always healing. And some people, to heal, need to undergo pain. That doesn't mean that you need to hurt others, but healing comes from also going through pain, or going through the pain. Actually, I've been healed by pain a lot of times in my life, even though it's something that it's not desirable, and we all will prefer to just have a beautiful life. But sometimes we get so much into our egoic reality, and so much into this corrupt world, and into doing the wrong thing all the time, that the only way for us to awaken from that is to finally undergo some pain. And unfortunately, instead, a lot of people that commit a lot of wrongdoings against others are oftentimes, because of that and thanks to that, protected, because they keep escaping pain. Because they keep escaping pain. You see, that's exactly what they're doing. The reason why a lot of people abuse others, and is really, or allow others, or enable others to be abused, is because they're afraid that they're gonna be the victim. They're afraid they believe that someone has to be the victim, and they don't want to be that one, right? And so they tend to abuse others, or to allow others to be victimized, because they're escaping abuse, they're escaping pain. And instead, sometimes pain is necessary, but ultimately it gets back to them, because for the law of cause and effect, what goes around comes around. And so if you give pain to others all the time and abuse others all the time, that makes just a turn and gets back to you. And that's exactly how it goes. And so that's exactly how why the universe is so really designed, is a closed system. And at some point it will get to you, maybe in a completely different way than what you have done to others, but that's exactly how it goes. And so, but that pushes people to understand, because once you feel pain by yourself, you understand what others went through, and you understand what you have caused, and you understand that it's wrong, right? Because if you never feel pain, you never understand why inducing pain to others is wrong. And so ultimately, pain can have a huge healing effect, and it can be a huge catalyzer for awakening and for healing. And so we're going to be talking about this topic also a lot during this new season. And we're going to be interviewing people talking about the ego, and how they went through their own ego death, and how that impacted, and all potentially the pain they went through, and how it changed them, and also the truth they found and how they found that truth, which is the same for everybody. Like ultimately, when we get to the ultimate truth, and I say ultimate just because we reach it at the end, but it's the only truth that really exists. And this is not, I feel like a lot of people have this idea or this hope, the multiple truth can exist at the same time, because it's a way of avoiding to deal with the fact that what we want to believe in is actually not the truth. That what we want to believe in is something ultimately that is a lie that allows us to keep going with our life in a way that is not really good in the world, even if we want to believe that we are, but it's not good. And unfortunately, what is, good and bad, we talk a lot about good and bad as well, but good and bad are just have more to do with desirable and undesirable at a universal level, in the sense that there are certain actions that if you repeat them constantly, you're just never gonna end your limbo, the limbo of this constant learning lesson that we are in. And there are certain choices that just keep you in that limbo, and certain other choices that free you from that limbo. And so this is really what it means, what good and bad means. There are some choices that are just unsustainable because they keep you in this constant loop, and certain choices that allow you to keep going and to evolve and to move forward in your awakening, your life, and in your personal evolution, and into embodying the mission that you have in this huge being that is the universe. And there are other choices instead that don't. They just force you into this lower state in which you're really a slave of your own ego, of yourself, of your trauma, of your fear. But you don't understand that. It's not that simple to understand that, because there are so many mechanisms. And I'm writing a book that if you want to be updated on when I'm going to publish it, you can send me an email. The book is about how to reach the ego death, and I'm going to be describing all the different shapes, all the different mechanisms that the ego really take in our mind, at the societal level, at the relational level, at the institutional level, at the psychological level, the physical level, in a lot of different ways, so that we can finally understand what the ego is. And I feel like the reason why I have ultimately come to the realization that I had also to start this season and to call it like this, which sounds very, polarizing, God's truth. There are people that don't believe in God. There are people that don't believe in Jesus. There are people that don't believe in anything else than just mundane physical reality. But this is the truth. So I can't call it in a different way, because this is the truth. There is, and I had proof myself a lot of times in my life that we are part of a bigger being that is God. We are part of a divine reality that has nothing to do with the mundane world that we perceive with our body and we experience with our body and with our ego. And so we are like embedded in this divine consciousness, divine reality that we don't see. We're completely disconnected from it because we have decided out of fear and out of ego to really stay in this lower state of consciousness and to really only live in this kind of constant limbo and this maze that the world is, which causes a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. And that's when pain becomes a catalyzer, because when you go through too much pain, then even your body can't take it anymore. And so it's your body that tells you, well, if I'm so much in pain, that there must be something else, because this cannot be it. This cannot be it. And so it's when you reach that threshold, that level of pain that you can't stand anymore, that you awaken. And unfortunately, as I said before, a lot of people escape pain in fear that there is nothing after pain, because people that don't believe in God, people that don't believe in anything else than the mundane world and money and like materialistic things, people that don't believe in anything else, they believe that pain is just the beginning of the end. That once they start feeling pain, they start crumbling down and they're gonna die. And they don't realize that instead that's just the end of the cocoon that is just it's too painful to be in there, and so it finally becomes a butterfly. And so that's just how pain catalyzes. We are not supposed to undergo pain, but if we are so embedded in our egoic reality that we can't and we don't want to get out of it, and actually we are instead addicted to it, then only pain can take us out of it and finally make us awaken and be like, wow, what was I doing? Where was I? This doesn't make any sense. And so we are today in a phase in society in which, unfortunately, everything is going wrong because too many people are escaping pain. Too many people believe that there's nothing else other than the materialistic, mundane world where we live. And I'm not talking about heaven. I'm really talking about a spiritual level of awakening. You can be in the same exact world, but once you awaken, then you are simply walking on the earth, but in a different way, and you're seeing things in a different way. And even what before will induce you pain, it doesn't induce you pain anymore, because now you're not in your ego anymore, and not you understand that you're not this body, that you're not this little person that interacts with people, that you're not this quenchable and destroyable thing that, if you fall you can get hurt, and if people yell at you you can feel emotional pain. So all these things that happen as a consequence of us forgetting of being this divine consciousness that we are, this eternal being that we are, ultimately cease to happen. Like, they don't happen anymore, because once you reach the ego death, then you stop feeling pain. And unfortunately, there are a lot of things in our existence that force us to force us into our egoic state. There are a lot of people around us. People are so addicted to their ego, so addicted to their egoic reality that they don't want to get out of it. They literally get withdrawal symptoms. And so ultimately, reaching God's truth is also understanding that all of that is false. Because if there is one truth, it's impossible that all these people are constantly in conflict, right? Because when people are in conflict, it's because they believe that they have one truth and the other person has another truth, and they both believe of being right. But that's false. It's impossible. You see, either one of them is right or both of them are wrong, but both of them cannot be right at the same time. And so if we all have all these different perspectives, and if we all believe that we all must win, that we all must prevail, that we all have the right to seek revenge, that we all have the right to become this and that, we don't realize that we really are living a dream, in a sense of a nightmare, really, not a dream. And so there must be something that goes past it, that is another perspective, that is outside of it, that is not the conflictual reality that we constantly live in every day, but a reality in which there is one truth, and once everybody finds it, we all agree with it, because it's the same truth for all of us. It's the only truth that exists. So it's all a matter of walking the path and the journey to the point of being capable of reaching that truth, of finding that truth, of seeing it or feeling it, and of tuning into it, like synchronizing, like tuning in, like you will do to a radio station. Because the truth is ultimately also the consciousness of the universe, is the consciousness, the divine consciousness, the consciousness of God. And so once you reach that level, that's the only truth that exists, and you start seeing everybody else that is in conflict with each other as just people that don't understand, that they're forgotten. People that have gotten so into their ego that they truly believed the lie that their ego was telling them. And so we all live in a world in which the great majority of the population is so much into their egoic reality that they now believe in their reality. They're so attached. If something bad happens to their properties, or if their life changes, or if someone withdraws things from them, they feel attacked. They feel like they cannot survive anymore. There's something that cannot survive anymore. And this is how our system works. This is how our system works. It's based on the idea that someone has to survive more than others, on discrimination. And so that comes from the idea that death is possible, that fear is possible, that ego is ultimately a reality. We live in a reality in which people believe of being the body that they occupy, and they forget of being this much, much higher and more peaceful a consciousness, universal consciousness, and it's always us coming back to this planet, and it's always us. We are just the grass, the grass that the earth makes through time due to the core of the earth being boiling, and so it creates all of these things on top of it that ultimately detach from it, roam around for a while, and then go back to it. And it's always us. And so the consciousness of the universe is always there. It's only our bodies that keep going through this turnover because matter is in itself temporary. It's like this conglomerate of cells and of molecules is temporary because it goes through oxidation. But and of course we can change how many years we want to live in this body, or we can live in this body based on our lifestyle. But ultimately it's just an antenna, and the highest you go with this antenna, the highest is the consciousness you can tap into. And the more you realize and you see things from a higher point, and if you have a higher point of view, then you see how everything else is just so nonsense. All the things that are happening today in our world are really so nonsense, and are ultimately due to people not being connected to the truth. And that's why this season is going to be talking about the truth. And we have done that before as well. Like in the previous season, ultimately we have been talking about the truth. Like we have been trying to really unravel different levels of this truth through different people. But in order for you to do something, for us to actually achieve a goal, we need to set that specific goal. And so this season is going to be specifically focused on that. And the reason why I have ultimately come to this conclusion is also thanks to my life story. Like I realized that I've been a very innocent child since the very beginning. I was very awakened actually since I was a kid, and I invented this beautiful meditation that at 7 years old, I don't even remember, that I teach in my classes today. I have modified it and improved it and made it a real meditation. At that time, I didn't know what a meditation was, but ultimately I was meditating and I was trying to reconnect with the universe, with the whole, and to remember that I'm just a piece of it. And that's crazy that as a child, I have reached that level of consciousness without anybody telling me that, like nor my parents or my family. I grew up in a very unconscious environment in a sense. And so it's crazy that as a kid, I have been able to tap into that high level of meditation or invent something so deeply meaningful and therapeutic and spiritually high. And I think we all as kids somewhat have a much higher wisdom than what we then believe we are acquiring through our lifetime, because we believe that we are acquiring wisdom, but what we're doing by going to school and by growing up is ultimately just being indoctrinated to be something that is useful to this egoic reality that everybody's on. Everybody is on this ego as people on a drug, and they're so addicted to it that as soon as a new kid is born, they see that kid as a potential new tool to be used and to be attached to this machinery that can grow and grow and grow and make more money and more tools and more arms and more brains. And so they tell us things and they give us notions and they make us spend years and years in school and in college for us to learn all of these notions so that we can become a piece of this machinery that someone already has designed so that we can help in achieving this goal that is ultimately doesn't lead anywhere. Because if the person that is driving the car is crazy, where do you think the car is going to go? Nowhere, right? And so if the person who is leading the car, that is our society, is in their ego, the ego can't possibly lead them anywhere but towards destruction, because the ego, as we said, is unsustainable and makes unsustainable choices. And so until we're going to be in our ego, we're going to have these cycles of growth and destruction that go from the individual level to the societal level as well. And all the previous societies in history have fallen because of that. Have fallen because the ego is unsustainable, because the decisions that the ego make get to the point of being so corrupt that nothing is predictable anymore, so corrupt that everything becomes so broken that, like if you give a role, imagine you have a company and you start hiring people and you give them tasks to do. And the first, as soon as you have a company that is with just 5 people, you have this company which you can talk to everybody, you can figure out, and you can look at them in the eyes and you can tell whether they're telling you the truth, and you can see that they're all doing their tasks. And then your company grows and it becomes 20, 30, 100, 200 people, and everybody's doing their task because they're really all people selected to do their thing. But now imagine that suddenly everybody starts being corrupt and everybody starts learning to lie and to deceive others and to have individualistic goals that go against the whole that they're part of. Then suddenly your company cannot do anything else but fail, because if you assign tasks to everybody, nothing actually gets done, and you don't understand why I gave tasks to everybody. How is that possible that nothing is getting done? Nothing is getting done because people have learned to lie, have learned to deceive, have learned to manipulate, have learned to not be truthful, to not stay in the truth, to not stay in the light, but to choose something else, to choose their ego. And so this is what all of this is about. And I feel like as a child, in my life, I have, because I was born so like innocent and naive, I was very, very much this naive little kid that will play all by myself all the time. I will play with plants and with roses and with mint. I will make my perfumes with my mint. And so I was like an herbalist as a kid. And I remember I would study animals and I would draw animals and I would study all the different animals and their habitats. I had all of these cards and I was very fascinated by all. On every card there was an animal with their actual taxonomic name and the description of their habitat, like watching a documentary but on cards. And I was so in love with these cards. I still remember visually all the animals that I've learned and that I learned to recognize and to learn the habits of. And I was so fascinated, and that was my world, really. Like I was always very much into these sort of things, and very, very naive and positive and innocent. Innocent, I think, is really the word, because what is innocence? Innocence is like, from a biblical standpoint, innocence is what Adam and Eve were before they decided to commit the original sin, before Eve ate the apple from the tree of knowledge. So I think really being innocent is, I believe in others' good faith. That's what innocent means. Innocence means I don't know that evil exists. I don't know that something bad exists. I don't know that there are people in the world that are actually mean and that can abuse me or can use me, and that they see me as a tool, not just as another equal person to them as much as I see them, right? And so that's innocence. Innocence is seeing others as just people, as just pieces of this fractal that we're part of this huge consciousness that we're part of. And instead of expecting for them to hurt us, we just see them as just another equal to us. And that's innocence. And so I think I've been innocent for a long time, regardless of my knowledge of things. Even if because of this innocence and naivete, I like the word naivete, but at the same time, I feel like it has a very deep negative meaning today in our society, because in a world that is corrupt and is abusive and is full of people who have ultimately learned to use people's naivete to abuse them. And then obviously, if you're naive, even just hearing the word "you're naive," it's an insult. Today, being naive is an insult, which is crazy, right? It's complete madness, because being naive should be nice. Why not? Why would you be naive? Why will naive be something negative? Don't you want for your kids to be innocent and happy and to not having to worry about dangers? Isn't this what we all try to do as parents, and like with our school system, to prolong, to extend the naivete of our kids? as much as possible so that they can enjoy the innocence of their childhood years. But why would we then not like the idea of naivete? We don't like it as adults because we realize that naivete is what made us become victims of some form of abuse. And this can go all the way from family abuse to relational abuse to being defrauded from companies and work, and consumer frauds as much as tax frauds and employers employment frauds. All of these frauds, what is a fraud? A fraud is being deceived thanks to the fact that we were naive, that we did not know that someone else had a whole strategy put in place, a whole protocol put in place to take advantage of our naivete. But it shouldn't be normal. We have normalized the absurd. We have normalized the fact that naivete puts us in danger and we have to escape for naivete. And so I agree with that in the sense that we need to be informed, and that the only person we actually have power is ourselves. And so obviously we want to get educated, we want to know, we have to know, but that shouldn't be the norm. In terms of the fact of our naivete being taken advantage of should not be the norm. Ultimately, it's good to be educated and to educate our kids so that they don't become victims, because we do live in a world that is very abusive. But we should not normalize the fact that the world is abusive. The world should not be abusive. It's okay to get informed, but if that is a reaction to a world that works in a way that doesn't make any sense. And getting educated is a way of also of decreasing the abuse, decreasing the possibility of for abusive people to even exist, in the sense of people become abusive if they see that there is a blind spot, right? If someone has a blind spot, so that is a chance to hurt them. But that, what we did not understand is that really comes from always the same person. And I explain what I mean with this. So I think most of us believe that in some way our naivete makes people act badly against us, that our naivete, our innocence makes people act in bad faith, that it makes them act in an abusive way because they see that they can. But that's not true. That is not true, you see. We believe in that, and because we believe in that, in some way we feel guilty for allowing us to be abused, for allowing us to have that innocence, to have the naivety, and we feel like, oh my gosh. And we're told by society, oh my gosh, why are you so naive? You have to learn, you have to teach to yourself to not undergo these sort of abuses, these sort of frauds. How could you not know, right? We're even guilt tripped when these things when bad things happen to us. If you're deceived or defrauded in any form, in any kind of way, we're in some way victimized, re-victimized by people around us. Like, how could you not know? Everybody knows, right? But this is what we don't understand is that, and you'll see by yourself in your own life, that people that do those things to you are always the same kind of people. And I'm not talking about I'm not saying that people who deceive others are born like that necessarily. I'm saying that it's a way of existing, like being abusive or not being abusive, or being good people. It's a way of existing that goes beyond the needs. And I've discovered it, and now I have confirmed, thanks to my own story, to my own life, because as I said, I was very naive as a kid, and then I learned all the strategies that people used against me to abuse me, to defraud me. I have been defrauded a lot of times. And, I feel like all those people that abuse others, they believe they have to perpetuate the innocence and the naivete in the population. Because if they don't, as soon as the population knows and discovers and eats from the tree of knowledge, then the population too is going to become abusive. But that is not true. Because people who were really good, in the sense they make good choices and they choose the light every time, they will choose the light regardless of their circumstances, regardless of how much knowledge they have. It's not that because you know how you have learned how a Ponzi scheme, then you're going to use it. It's not that because you have learned that you have been victim of a certain kind of fraud, then you're going to use that fraud against others too. It's not that you have and instead there are people that insistently, persistently, and constantly do work to learn new ways to defraud others, new ways to abuse others, new ways to attack others. And so they do that first. They don't do that because they believe, because they've been defrauded, they've been victimized first, and because of that they learn and they do the same to others. They don't follow these kind of path. And so you see what I mean, that there is in the world there are two kinds of people. And please understand that this is not a way of creating a separation which will go completely against what I've said earlier, right? What I said is that we are one, we're this huge consciousness of the universe, we're God, and so we are a piece of the whole, and we have just forgotten of being a piece of the whole. But this is not a way of creating this separation. This is a way of making people understand that it's about what we choose, what kind of choices we make. And there are people who always choose the same things from the very beginning before even being victimized. They have never been victimized, but they believe they can. And because they believe they can, then they start doing it against others because they are afraid of becoming the victim instead. And there are other people who have never been on that side of the abuser, who have always been on the side of the victim. And even after learning all the different strategies, all the different protocols that can be used to abuse others, they don't do the same. And so these are two different kinds of people, because these are two different kinds of choices. That from a physical standpoint, one is the egoic choice that constantly goes backward and backward and backward in this constant limbo, and the other one is the choice that chooses the light. And when you choose the light, everything you do is ultimately to keep going and moving forward. And in fact, I had a whole spiritual awakening regardless of all the negative things I went through, of all the abuses I went through. I have always chosen the light. I've always chosen to improve myself. I've always chosen to learn and to heal others when I understood that others were hurting me, because ultimately they had forgotten that we were brothers and sisters. And so that's the difference. And where does that come? Where does that difference come from? And that difference comes from really deep unresolved trauma. And we're going to be talking about this in the very first episode of this season, because deep unresolved trauma is really the real cause of everything in our society and of the ego itself. And this deep unresolved trauma can take many forms and is very invisible to most of us, because that deep unresolved trauma is oftentimes something that doesn't even come from us, but it comes from an epigenetic signature that we went through. And that's where also Jesus comes in, and my new book comes in, which is the title of the book is Kill Jesus, A Guide to the Ego Death. And the reason why it's called Kill Jesus, not because I want you to kill Jesus, obviously, but because what has happened in our society is really that Jesus has existed, and the crucifixion of Jesus, as much as the punishment and killing of a lot of good innocent people in society, has happened all over the world. From Jesus to a lot of others, has happened all over the world. And so whenever people have chosen through history their ancestors that they come from, and so it's in their DNA, right? We all are in some way attached to this body, and so in this body there is also a signature of all these different choices that our amygdala, especially the part of the brain that is in charge of the fight or flight mode, our amygdala is this chess player that played all the possible games throughout evolution. And at some point, it has recorded one choice, which is kill Jesus, kill innocence to survive. And whenever we meet the same kind of person, the same kind of innocence, the same kind of light that some of our ancestor or the some of our ancestor has in some way killed in the past or has chosen to look away from, or whenever we find ourselves in the same circumstances in which the strength that we believe we had was not enough to choose the light, and so we chose the ego out of fear. We chose to not help people who were being abused, to not help the innocent, to not choose the light, and we have instead chosen the darkness, the ego, the evil. Every time we have, all of us in some way, or most of us have made that choice at least once. And because of that, from then on, from that moment on, we kept repeating the same exact choice every time, because not making that choice every time forces us to re-look at us and be like, wow, so if this choice is wrong, see, if this choice is wrong now, it was wrong then. And so I have been wrong. I have been a killer. I've been an enabler. I've been an abuser. I have allowed innocence to be killed. I have allowed Jesus to be killed. I have allowed people who were trying to save me and who loved me to be killed, to be oppressed, to be suppressed. And so because of that, most of us, the great majority of humanity, really has that kind of trauma in their own DNA and in their own epigenome. And because of that, every time they find themselves in the same circumstances right now, they don't even know why, but it's ingrained in their fight or flight mode. And that's why we need to overcome the fight or flight mode, because it's ultimately an obsolete way of functioning that places us constantly in this limbo of circumstances. And so every time they find that choice, they have to choose the same thing. And I think I, as a woman, as a kid, as a person, I've been a lot of times, for a lot of people in my life, this innocence, that when they saw my innocence, when they saw my naivete, when they saw my just light, the fact that I didn't want to hurt them, that just wanted to love them, or that I was just open, right? I was not trying to defend myself. I was giving them the benefit of the doubt. Actually, I was giving them a choice. Every time I have given them with my innocence, and you do the same every day. Every time we are innocent, we put people in front of the choice. What do I do with this innocence? What do I do with this person? How do I act against them or with them or towards them? What do I do with this? Because every one of us has at some point made a choice in our evolution, throughout evolution, in when encountering innocence. And people who have fear of survival, of not survival, and fear of not being good enough, of not being capable of surviving without killing others, without hurting others. Everybody who has a frugal mentality, who believes that their resources are scarce because it's in their ego, and the ego is about scarcity. So everybody who has that kind of mindset, ultimately, whenever they encounter someone who is naive, they see a prey. They see someone who is either a prey or a competitor for resources. And so they have to choose to either kill them or to sabotage them or to, prevent them from succeeding, prevent them from existing, or even quench their light, because it bothers them. It bothers them to see this innocence, because if they had to choose to kill their own innocence a long time ago, they had to choose for their innocence to be put aside because it was a danger. Because when you believe that innocence is bad, being naive is bad, and you put it aside, then every time you encounter naivety in others, you think, you are naive, you're a problem. You're a problem because you're naive. And so that kind of trauma, that kind of choice that we have made a long time ago in history, and that a lot of people have made, it's ingrained in their DNA. And now people just tend to make these choices out of just they don't even know why, but they have triggers, and every time they find themselves and they encounter this choice, and I have given this choice to a lot of people a lot of times, and everybody who is innocent and just I come with peace, right? I come in peace, right? Every time you come in peace, there is someone who attacks you. And so I have given this chance to people that hurt me a lot of times in my life, because I always came in peace and always came in like with all my 100%. I'm going to give my 100%. I'm going to put my 100% into whatever we were trying to do together, whether it was a relationship or a job or anything. And instead, people will see that as a chance to hurt me, to use me, or to sabotage me, or to abuse me. So it's important to understand that people who make those choices are not the same kind of people who don't make those kind of choices. And it has nothing to do with the circumstances, because I have found myself in a real situation of scarcity a lot of times in my life, and I've never decided to hurt others as a way of surviving myself. And so it's really a choice that doesn't come from not having money, that doesn't come from really not having anything, that doesn't come from real danger. It's a choice that comes from within. It's a choice that comes from the fact that we have ultimately decided a long time ago to quench our own light, to quench our own innocence, to kill our own Jesus, to kill our own Jesus inside of us, because we believed that Jesus was not enough. And why I say Jesus and the crucifixion, because that has been a real thing. Like, the crucifixion has actually happened, and that has something, crucifixion, as much as burning witches and oppressing women and a lot of things that happen every day against innocent people. And this is there are various reactions to this, various reactions to when these sort of things happen all over the world. We're seeing what is happening in Gaza, what is happening in Iran, in Afghanistan, and in all of these places where women are being oppressed, kids are being killed, and ultimately these are innocent people, people who have done nothing else other than existing and being women or being kids or being living in a country, right? So what's wrong if they don't? And so now we live in a situation in which, and now and throughout history, these things have happened throughout history. There have been a lot of wars on the world. There have been a lot of witch burning, and like there has been a lot of killing of innocents on our planet. And every one of us, as in some way, as particles in a solution, have in some way interacted with these sort of situations throughout history. And so our amygdala in all of us, the amygdalas that have survived today, which are the amygdalas we have today, have in some way recorded how to react, how we have reacted, and what has allowed us to survive that time. And so every time we find ourselves in the same circumstances, we react in the same way. And so this is really what the difference between these two kinds of people is. And I'm going to talk more about this in the very first episode, but this is really the difference. And this is what also why I want to talk about God's truth, because God's truth is the same thing as what makes our body healthy versus what makes us develop a tumor. So you see, the ego is like a cancer. So the ego is like a piece of the universe that believes of being alone and against everything else, and of having to multiply and attract resources by draining the resources from the rest, as a tumor will do, as a cancer will do. And so that kind of mindset is the mindset of a cancer. It's not the mindset of the body. A cell of the body instead functions in a completely different way. A cell of the body knows that abundance is there all the time. A cell of the body knows that the only thing the cell has to do is to be itself, and that by being itself, resources are gonna come, things are gonna come. And so while the cancer cells, because they detach from the body, they completely lose their function in the world, in the body. And so they're on their own. They're on their own at that point because they've lost their function. And so they have to find ways to train and to attract as much as they can and to deceive others and to find ways to divert all the resources that the body has for its own cells and to bring them to themselves, towards themselves. And that's how they create the mass that then almost kills the body unless the body fasts and decides to really change. And then instead, for a cell of the body, as long as the cell continues to have its own role in the body is gonna send things. It's gonna send resources. It's gonna send all the things that the cell needs to have in order for the cell to survive, because the cell is doing its job. And so that's what I'm doing today, in a sense. Like, this is my role. My role is to tell people, to instruct people, because I'm like an immune cell of the body. I went through all of these things, and I went through all of these. I gave people choices all the time. And so now I know how people react to those choices and what kind of people react in what kind of ways and why. And I have studied all of that. And so that's why I think today we really are at a point in which really the universal judgment is very, very close, because that's what the universal judgment is. It's like a diagnosis. You know what I mean? It's more like a doctor going on the earth, sent on the earth to go around and hang around and test and check and then in the end, after trying and trying to find people who function in a different way, to find the solution, to find things somewhere else. I lived in Italy, and I moved. I was born in the small town in the south of Italy, and then I felt like that place did not really, there was something wrong, and then I moved, and there was something wrong, and then I moved, and there was something wrong, and I'm like, so the whole world is like this. And then I tried to ask help to anybody I could, whenever I found myself in a situation in which I was like, well, this cannot be how the world works. Let me ask to our institutions. Let me ask to the authorities in the field. Let me ask to someone who is supposed to be higher than me and is supposed to tell me how the world really works and how to handle this. That doesn't make any sense. This is obviously wrong. How is that possible? There must be a mistake. So let me talk to someone higher than me in the chain of command to understand. And by doing this, and by constantly really having this naivete and this innocence, and really believing that I lived in a world where good things, like the world was supposed to be healthy and innocent as well. And I constantly found, by being this innocent person going around and trying to test the world, I have ultimately allowed others to have a choice and to choose all the time and to show me what their real problem is and how they will choose. And then I will give people a second chance, and they will choose in the same exact way again. And I will give them a third chance, and they will do the same thing or worse. And so by doing this, this is a test. This is ultimately a test. And once you do these kind of tests all the time, then you can come up with a diagnosis. And what is the diagnosis? The diagnosis is that the world is sick. We live in a world that is sick. And what is the sickness in our world? The sickness is our ego. And our ego is like a parasitic idea in our mind that makes us believe that we are separate from the whole. And people believe it so much that they got addicted to it, because the ego gives them a lot of good, cool things, and they make them feel good about themselves, good in a certain way, just because it makes them forget how really feeling joy feels like. And so they feel good in a very mundane kind of way, in an egoic kind of way, but that they forgot what the actual joy is. And so we live in a world that is sick with an intracellular parasite. This intracellular parasite, so a parasite is inside the cell, so it's very difficult to find. And so as an immune cell of the body, I had to go through a lot of these tests to figure out what was going wrong with our society, because people could not see that there was something wrong inside of themselves, and I could see it from their eyes that there's something wrong that they're addicted to. That's the ego. They're addicted to their ego, but it's not them. It's a parasitic idea in their mind. And it's interesting that also in shamanism, they consider the ego a parasite. And I didn't even know that. And I had written a book about this like 4 years ago that I have never published. I'll probably publish it at some point. But this is the sickness of our world. We are affected by an intracellular, intra-brain parasite that is this parasitic idea that most likely also is physical. Most likely there is a whole bunch of neurons that really, it's the amygdala ultimately, I think, that ultimately believes of being alone, and that has become a parasite that we need to kill. And how do we kill it? By really nurturing our consciousness. And this is why this season is called God's Truth, because what is God's truth? God's truth is the opposite of the ego, is the truth. And so if you're sick and you don't realize that you're sick, and you start identifying with something different in you because you're sick, like a drug addict starts identifying with the person that needs to get the drug again and again because he wants the drug, you just forgot of how happy and how different he was before being addicted. And so the truth is that he's not an addicted person. He's a person who is being colonized by the idea of having to get that drug, because the drug induced addiction and induced a bunch of neurons in his brain to proliferate and to grow. And so the same thing is with the ego. And so the truth is, you're not addicted. You just forgot how you were before getting addicted to this. And so the truth is our normal state. And the egoic state is what we have today, which is a reality in which we believe we have to keep making the same choice over and over and over against others, because we forgot that others are our brothers, that others are like us, that we're just one. And because of that, most of us have created a cancer: fraternities, Masonic organizations, institutions, churches, everybody, all of these institutions, everybody on earth has today a sickness that comes from having a long time ago chosen in their ancestry or in their heritage or like by themselves in this life. They've made that one choice of killing their own light, of killing Jesus, of killing innocent. And because of that, killing can be abusing, can be any kind of like abuse. Every time they've chosen the ego in fear of becoming victims, and they've chosen to victimize others, every time they've done that, that's really what has caused this parasite to grow and to colonize their brain. And now they believe they have to be that every time. And it's interesting because it's the same thing we do. And that happened to me in toxic relationships, for example. In toxic relationships, a lot of times people tend to stay in the relationship for a long time, because every time they get to the choice of, do I interrupt this relationship or not? They think, well, but I have already invested time in this relationship. What do I do? Maybe I should try to fix it. And so they choose to stay more. And so the next time they have the same choice again. Now, again, they are like, oh, but what do I do? Do I want to really interrupt this relationship or not? Because I have already spent time in this relationship. And every time, the time they have spent, that they've invested in this relationship is bigger. And it's heavier on the scale, this scale that they use to make their choice. But it's bigger because the previous time they have chosen to perpetuate, to continue the relationship. And the previous time have chosen, and the time before that have chosen the same thing. And so it's ultimately us who, by making the same choice over and over and over, it makes it bigger and bigger and bigger. When we put it on the scale, at that point is worse. And so it's the same thing as when people accuse others in lawsuits and things like that. It's like, because people don't decide that one time to repent and to seek forgiveness, every time they make the same choice, and every time is worse. And so the next time, if the first time they're like, I don't want to say that I'm guilty, so the second time, they have committed more things for them to cover up for their guilty things they have previously done. And so now on this scale, it weighs more and more and more. But it's ultimately this one choice that they make every time that forces them to perpetuate their their state, to perpetuate this situation that they go through, this limbo. And it's never gonna end, because as my innocence has put people in the in front of this choice. This is the earth is nothing else than a learning tool for our spirits, for us as souls. It's just a learning tool. And so until we learn that we have to choose the light, the same choice will keep appearing to us. We're going to be put in front of that choice constantly, all the time, because we have to choose the light, which is the only truth. And every time that we don't choose the light, we're perpetuating, we're going back, and we're going back to point zero again. But this time it's heavier, because this time we have perpetuated it. And so this time it's not just us, it's our entire lineage, our entire ancestral lineage that has committed all these things for so long. And thanks to that, we have gotten so high in society, so far away from the people who have abused for thousands of years, that now we have to maintain that. Because if we don't, what are all the people that we have hurt gonna do to us? But truth is that the abusers and the abused function in a different way. And so no matter what you do to someone who is victimized and who always chooses the light, that person will always choose the light, will always choose the light. And so what these people don't understand it is that it's themselves who perpetuate their idea that they have to make this constant choice of choosing darkness. And the reason why they do this is because they believe that everybody is like them, because they believe that as much as they became abusive after discovering that in the world there are things that allow you to abuse other things, and that naivete instead and innocence make you become abused. They believe that everybody thinks like them, and that if they allow others to have the same information, the same power that they have on them, they're going to do the same to them. This is the same thing that is happening right now and for thousands of years against minorities, against women, against black people, against people of color, against immigrants, because people believe, wow, I have abused this category of individuals for thousands of years. If suddenly I'm not going to have power anymore, what are they going to do to me? And reality is that this can happen with people of your own kind too, and quote unquote kind, because again, we're all one. This doesn't happen because of the category of people. This happens because some people are good people and some people make the wrong choice every time, and until they learn. And there is always a point in which they learn. It usually happens on the deathbed, usually happens at times in which they're finally so weak and so powerless that they can't abuse others anymore. And there is this little kid that goes to their deathbed and smiles at them, and they realize they only had to love the world, and nothing will happen to them. And I think this is really the real problem of society, that we keep perpetuating the same choices over and over and over, because really humanity is, we do that unconsciously for most part. Like, people do it unconsciously, but there are really a lot of ways of that life makes us become conscious of those things. Conscious in the sense of aware, more than conscious. Aware of those choices. And once we become aware, at that point we really have the choice. The choice of deciding what to do next, what we want to do next. And if we make the same choice over and over, we're simply going back and back and back. We're gonna coming back to the same exact choice that the universe is gonna give us again and again and again, because the entire universe is supposed to, and it will, awaken spiritually. It's just a matter of time. And so every time you make the wrong choice, every time you choose the ego, or you or anybody else chooses the ego instead of the light, that person simply is staying backward in the evolution of the universe, and is simply, as you know, as Jesus said, like, they who believe, who are the first, are really the last wave of awakening of the universe. Because all those who they believe they're abusing, they're really pushing them towards awakening, because they're making pain so unbearable for them, being in their ego so unbearable, that these people awaken. And so they're pushing with their attempt to prevent themselves from undergoing pain, and by pushing others to undergo pain from a physical standpoint, what they're actually doing is they're pushing the layer of the pores of the lower classes of the population to awaken. which are now becoming first. And all the people who try to escape and are at the top of the hierarchy of our egoic society are really the last layer, the last wave that still has to awaken. They are aware, but they're not conscious. And they're not conscious that what they're doing is really wrong and it doesn't make any sense. And it's creating a world that is really mad, doesn't make any sense. It's really made of madness. So this season is here to really give you guys the tools to understand what kind of choices you make that are ultimately keeping you in your own limbo, how to really recognize your own ego. Because I also come in contact with a lot of people, and I coach people and I help people awaken from their trauma and from their ego, and it is difficult. Like a lot of us, just like unfortunately due to all the TV and all the things. TV is a huge way in which our egoic society is perpetuating the ego, because the ego is a wavelength. The ego is the wavelength of deceit, of lies, of not being aligned with your truth. And so every time you watch TV, and TV is really, the person in the TV is wearing a mask and is not being transparent and is trying to play a role because he's afraid of what is going to happen if he's going to say something different. So every time you watch that and you believe and you tune into that frequency, you believe that that's the truth, which is not. It's obviously a lie, but you believe in that frequency, then you're perpetuating your own ego. And so I suggest everybody to really stop watching TV. From now on, I don't watch TV. I have it, but I don't watch it, other than for movies that I choose on purpose and for content that I really choose for it to be either functional to my journey or intentional, in the sense that also it's people who I know that they're lying, like stand-up comedies. They obviously lie, but they tell you that they're lying. It's just a joke. Or like things that like you can be aware that they're lying and you can see through that and see the actual feeling of the actor in that moment is. And so it's important to really tune into that level of truth. What the truth is a frequency, as much as lying is a frequency. But lying is the frequency of misalignment, because lies don't really exist. There's only one thing that exists, which is truth. And you can see the truth through all the lies that people tell you, because it's there, it's always there. It's the only thing that exists. The only thing that people can do is to put on layers of lies on top of layers of lies on top of layers of lies. That is their ego and the egoic society they create. But with this podcast, the season of this podcast, we are going to go straight to the truth so that you can really realign on the truth. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. And I hope and I'm sure you will really enjoy this season that is going to really be healing you in a very, very deep way, because ultimately the highest form of healing is really giving you the truth, giving you the truth so that you can heal from trauma and from your ego and finally realign. And by realigning to your truth, to the truth, you're going to realign your entire body, your energy, your spiritual energy is just another level of existence. And you've just drifted from it without knowing that you have. So, you can find me at 360holisticcoach.com, and please check out the description of this episode, because you're also going to find a link to support me, because as you know, I completely design and produce and do everything I have to do to make this podcast available to you. And so it's also important that we understand that we need to support who helps us and who gives us their education and their wisdom, because it's the only way of obtaining or building the world that you want. You have to water the plants that you want to find in your future, and if you water the bad weeds, you're gonna find bad weeds. If you water the flowers, you're gonna find flowers. So let's have a butterfly field full of flowers, and let's support each other. So you can find the link to support me in the description, and you can find me next time. And if you're on YouTube, please turn on the notification. I think you can do the same on all platforms as well. And obviously, I always suggest you guys to check the video as well, that you can also see on Spotify and YouTube. I'm not sure about Apple Podcast and Amazon Music. I don't think they have the video as well, but I always suggest you to check the video because it's another way, it's a better way of following the podcast, especially because I'm Italian originally, and so I gesture a lot. I use my hands a lot to explain, and so see, as I'm doing it, as I'm talking to you, I use my hands a lot, and so that means that it's a different dimension of really understanding how my brain works and what I'm trying to explain to you. And yeah, so please tune in next time, and 360holisticcoach.com. You can find me on Instagram at 360holistics.coach, and please check out also my practice and my events. And if you're in the LA area, please come join my outdoor classes and book a one-on-one session with me so that we can also go deeper into your own trauma, your own healing. And please tune in for the next episode. Thank you.